everybody, I'm Ryan, and over the course of the past few weeks, I've been looking at green-black mid-range and standard. I've been looking at like a deck tech of the deck, overall strategy of the deck, card choices in the deck, sideboard guide against the top 10 most popular decks in standard, flex slots and different builds of the deck, nuances and different play patterns of the deck, and I wanted to combine all of those things into one video so you have a one-stop shop for green-black mid-range in standard. Enjoy. So this is the current version of Golgari Midrange. It's gone through quite a few iterations recently, responding to the meta mostly, and its overall strategy is exactly what a black midrange deck strategy is. It's attempting to one-for-one their opponent, come out on top in major exchanges, and play creatures that are just higher card quality and more threatening, and do a little bit more than what they do on face value, so the one-for-ones are worth it. It is fair magic in a nutshell, so let's talk about the cards. Starting with the lands. The lands are just basic black-green lands. However, there are 4 2/2 of utility lands. First off, in Fountain Port. Fountain Port, you can tap to add a waste mana, or 2 mana and tap it to sacrifice token and draw a card, 3 mana and tap it to pay 1 life, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token, and 4 mana and tap it to create a treasure token. Fountain Port's just a really good way to use that extra mana to create fish, draw a few extra cards, maybe create a treasure. And Soulstone Sanctuary is, you can tap it to add a waste mana. You can pay 4 mana, and this land's become a 3/3 creature with vigilance, and all creature types, it is still a land. What's cool about that, and maybe not cool about that if you're playing against board wipes, I guess, is that it does not stop being a creature at end of turn like a lot of cards like this do. So you only have to invest mana into it once, and then you can keep attacking with it. And it's very, very strong. As far as 1 mana cards go, we're playing Cut Down just against these aggressive decks, destroying a creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. And we're playing 4 Llanowar Elves to ramp our mana and just get out ahead of our opponents, which is another way that these 1-for-1 decks can win the game. Anoint with Affliction is very good, again, against these small creatures, but also is a really clean answer to the white enduring creature. Go for the Throat is pretty much an unconditional removal because there's not a lot of playable artifacts. Mosswood Dread Knight on one side is Dread Whispers, where you draw a card and lose a life, and then it goes on an adventure, and then you can play Mosswood Dread Knight, which is a 2-mana 3/2 with Trample. When it dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. So this is a card that if they don't exile or play a card like Anoint with Affliction, you can just keep casting over and over, keep drawing cards, keep providing threats. This is kind of exactly what a deck like this needs, where if the rest of the deck is 1-for-1ing, this is the kind of card that can get you ahead of it, where it can 1-for-0 your opponent, continue to draw cards, continue to be a threat. Tear Asunder as a 1-of just has artifact or enchantment hate, and it's also fine to play in the main deck because even if they don't have artifacts or enchantments, you can pay extra mana and have it exile just an online permanent. Blot Out is a really cool card, 3 mana instant. Target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value among creatures or planeswalkers they control. It's a reasonably clean answer to planeswalkers, because a lot of the time planeswalkers are the highest mana cost. It's also a reasonably clean answer to opposing Thruns, and it's just a decent card, especially to play at instant speed. Playing 3 Preacher the Schisms. Playing this on turn 2, especially with Llanowar Elves, is so strong. It's a 2/4 with Death Touch. Whenever Preacher the Schism attacks, the player with the most life or tied for the most life, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink, which you can sack the token to Fountain Port, by the way. And whenever Preacher the Schism attacks while you have the most life or are tied for the most life, you draw a card and lose a life. What's kind of cool about Preacher the Schism is that if you have the same life total as your opponent, both things happen, which is wild. We're also playing 3 Glissa Sunslayer, also insane to play on turn 2. Is a 3-mana 3/3 with First Strike and Death Touch. First Strike Death Touch means that it wins every combat, which is wild, unless your opponent also has First Strike or Indestructible or something. When it deals combat damage to a player, choose one. You draw a card, lose a life, destroy target enchantment, remove up to 3 counters from target permanent. There's a lot of stuff we can do with this, but as you can see, this card's a lot like Mosswood Dread Knight in that it is more than what it is on the surface and can pull us ahead as we 1-for-1 our opponents. We're playing 2 Maelstrom Pulse just as a catch-all removal. Also, if we're able to kill multiple creatures or permanents with the same Maelstrom Pulse, it's just gravy. 3 Shieldred. Shieldred is extremely powerful. Is a 4-mana 4/5 with Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, gain 2 life. When your opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. This allows us to pull ahead in life total and is also a very scary threat on its own and very hard to answer. We're playing The End. Spells cost 2 less to cast if your life total is 5 or less. Hopefully that isn't happening. But we exile target creature or planeswalker, and then you get to extract that creature, which is a great catch-all removal and really good against decks that are playing cards like Mosswood Dread Knight or Shieldred or things like that you really want out of their deck and want to be able to exile. We're playing 2 Gix's Command. Now, Gix's Command is fine in the main deck because it's fine against the slower decks because you can bring creatures back and maybe make your opponent sacrifice creature or whatever. But really, it's in our deck for the red decks to be able to give something lifelink to wipe the board and really shut the door on these aggressive decks. We're playing 2 Thrun Breaker of Silence just as a very, very hard to answer creature, a very hard to block creature. It is all around, like, can kind of close the door on these mid-range decks like Green and Dimir. As far as the sideboard goes, we've already talked about Cut Down. We're playing Duress for these combo and control decks to be able to take out these non-creature spells. We've already talked about the end. Harvester of Misery has gone up pretty significantly in stock. It's very good against the aggressive decks, especially the Gruul and mono red decks, because it can just wipe the board, and is also early removal, so we're starting to play it as a 4 of rather than a 1 of. We're playing a single Terra Sunder. We've already talked about that to join the one in the main deck. We're playing 3 Tranquil Frillback. Tranquil Frillback is an interesting catch-all. We side it in against decks that have artifacts or enchantments that we dislike and aggressive decks so we can gain 4 life and just have a blocker. It's also fine as Graveyard Hate, so it's like really, really good all-around creature. And then we're playing 2 Nissa Ascended Animus, both as artifact and enchantment hate, and also it can close the door on these decks that are going very, very long with us. So this is my green-black mid-range deck. I'm off the Demons version. This is purely a mid-range version. And if you're interested in an analysis of the deck, I've already done that. You should check that out. This is just focused on the sideboard, so let's talk about these sideboard cards. Cut Down is for these aggressive decks. Duress is for like control or domain or really anything with a lot of non-creature spells that we care about. The End is really for like mid-range decks. It's a decent planeswalker removal as well. Harvester of Misery we're playing as a 4 of, mostly for tokens decks. It's decent against Dimir, also very good against the aggressive decks. Terra Sunder is a decent all-around removal, but also targeted enchantment and artifact hate. Same thing with Tranquil Throwback, also it gains life and is a blocker, so it's decent against aggressive decks. And then Nissa Ascended Animist is great against control, great against these mid-range decks, and great artifact and enchantment hate. So the most popular deck in Standard is Dimir Midrange. Against Dimir Midrange, we are bringing in Cut Down, we are bringing in The End, we're bringing in Harvester of Misery. We're going to be bringing out Terra Sunder. Gist Command can be good, but I don't think it's good that often. I like cutting Glissa as well because, frankly, they aren't looking to block and are just going to remove it. And Glissa's not going to be blocking flyers anyway. I just like cutting Glissa. This is how I sideboard against Dimir Midrange. The second most popular deck is the mirror match, is Golgari Midrange. Against Golgari Midrange, we're bringing in The End again. We're bringing in Terra Sunder, it's decent exile removal for 4 mana, similar to The End. And we're bringing in Nissa just as a finisher. We're taking out Gist Command, because it doesn't really do anything in this matchup, but get things back, and we don't really have a lot to get back that we really care about. And Cut Down's like really bad, so I guess we keep 1 Gist Command in. This is how we sideboard in the mirror match. The third most popular deck is the Gruul Prowess deck. Against Gruul Prowess, we're bringing in Cut Down, we're bringing in the 4 Harvester of Misery, and we're bringing in Tranquil Frillback to gain life and just be a blocker. We're taking out these expensive removal spells and things that don't really do anything. Like anything over 3 mana that doesn't just win the game or is difficult to answer, we kind of have to take out. Similar to Terra Sunder, which we kind of have to treat like a 4 mana spell. Glissa is just too easy for them to answer. And then we're taking out Blot Out just because it's not super targeted removal. And I like every other card like a lot more. So this is how we're going to sideboard against Gruul Prowess. The fourth most popular deck is Jeskai Aggro, Jeskai Convoke, whatever you want to call it. We're bringing in a Cut Down. We're bringing in Harvester of Misery, maybe. There we go. There's an argument for artifact and enchantment hate, but I don't really like it. So we're going to bring out a Terra Sunder, bring out The End. We're kind of treating this similar to the Gruul Aggro deck. I'm going to bring out the Thruns. And taking out a Blot Out, I think, is totally fine. So that's how we're going to sideboard against the Jeskai Convoke deck. The fifth most popular deck is the Domain deck. Against Domain, we are bringing in the Duresses. They have a lot of scary non-creature spells. Bringing in The End to take out their threats, which is, again, very scary. Terra Sunder and Tranquil Frillback are good for artifact and enchantment hate, and similar with Nissa, artifact and enchantment hate, but it's also a finisher. Going to be bringing out these Gist Command, really does nothing. Anoint with Affliction really does nothing. Cut Down really does nothing. And we aren't really looking to go long. We're looking to answer what they have going on and just beating them. So I like taking out the Preacher of the Schisms. Glissa is better here because of the artifact and enchantment hate when Glissa connects. So this is how I sideboard against Domain. The sixth most popular deck is the Mono Red Prowess deck. We're going to be sideboarding the same against Mono Red Prowess as we duel against Gruul. So just as a reminder, this is what what it looks like. So there you go. The seventh most popular deck is the Azorius Convoke deck. We're going to be sideboarding the same as against Jeskai Convoke. Again, here's a reminder what it looks like. There you go. The eighth most popular deck is Boros Mice. Against Boros Mice, we're going to be sideboarding the same as the aggressive decks. Again, here is a reminder of what it looks like. Though Boros Mice has a lot more of enchantments, so Tranquil Throwback is actually better, which is pretty cool. There you go. The ninth most popular deck is the Temur Floodcaller combo. Against this deck, we're bringing in Duresses. I'm a fan of the end because they don't have a lot of creatures to actually kill us with. Terra Sunder and Tranquil Flowback are good for like Storm Chaser's talent and whatnot. So we can take out the cut downs because they can get our creatures a little too big. And I think we just want to be defeating them literally as fast as possible. So we're going to take out some of these expensive spells. Shave on a Shield Red. I think that's totally fine. So sorry, sideboard against Temur Floodcaller combo. And then the 10th most popular deck is the Mono White Token Control deck. We're going to bring in Duress. They have mostly non-creature spells. Being able to selectively take those out feels really good. Harvester of Misery is totally solid, destroying all of the tokens, getting things out of the way. They also play a ton of enchantments, so we want our enchantment hate and finishers. Honestly, I'm also a fan of the end, like being able to take these cards out. We're going to be bringing out Gix's Command, and then we're going to be bringing, actually, we want Anoint with Affliction. We're going to be bringing out most of these removal spells that just really don't do anything. We can take out Blot Out as well. And then while it's important to get like a really fast start, the games are often going to go long. And so Llanowar Elves is just an awful top deck, and I'd rather have all my top decks be insane. So that's how I'm going to sideboard against Mono White Token Control. We're going to start with the non-flex slots. These are the non-negotiables in green-black mid-range in standard. These 42 cards in the main deck and these 4 cards in the sideboard. You can pause and look at them if you would like, but we have to talk about the 18 cards we need to pick for the main deck and the 11 cards we need to pick for the sideboard. And it's really surprising to me that this is like this, because frankly, green-black mid-range is the second most popular deck in standard at the moment. And the fact that there isn't a more solid stock list is really surprising to me, but it's also really cool that you can do almost anything with the deck. But these are the flex slots in green black mid-range. Now, the first thing you're going to do is it wants to run 25 lands, and only 21 lands are stock. And so you're going to select what you want for the lands between 2 Fountain Ports, which allows you to sacrifice a token, draw a card, which includes like map tokens and these vampire tokens from Preacher of the Schism and stuff like that. You can pay 3 mana to create a 1/1 blue fish creature token, or pay 4 mana to create a treasure token. It's really good if games go really long, allows you to get some pretty good card advantage, provide a threat if they deal with literally everything, stuff like that. Mishra's Foundry taps for a generic mana. You pay 2 mana. Mishra's Foundry become a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn, and it's still land. And you pay 1 mana and tap it to have target attacking assembly worker get +2/+2 until end of turn. So they combo with each other, so having multiples is really solid. This is pretty good if you want a cheap way to, again, apply pressure and maybe mess up combat and stuff like that. Or an option is 3 Soulstone Sanctuary, where you can pay 4 mana and have it become a 3/3 vigilance of all creature types, and it's still a land. Notice that it doesn't stop being a creature, which is bad against board wipes, but really nice because you don't have to keep putting mana into it. And 2 Underground Mortuary, and enters tapped when it enters Surveil 1, which is really good if you want to make sure you hit your colors. So you're going to select 4 of any of these lands to start to finish out your mana base. Now you can choose to play Cut Down 3 and 4 if you're worried about aggressive decks. This is a 1 mana instant destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. You can play a main deck Duress if you're worried about the decks like Domain or Control or Mono White or things like that. The second main deck, Anoint with Affliction, is very good against the white enduring creature, is very good in the mirror against Mosswood Dread Knight, and also is just like a pretty unconditional removal for the red decks, especially for Heartfire Hero. 4 Deep Cavern Bat is an option. It's a 2 mana 1/1 with Flying of Lifelink. When Deep Cavern Bat enters, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it until Deep Cavern Bat leaves the battlefield. This is really good, and being able to tear up your opponent's hand However, they get the card back when Deep Cavern Bat goes away, and so it's not very good against decks with a ton of removal. You can play a single Nowhere to Run. Is a 2-mana flash enchantment. When Nowhere to Run enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -3/-3 till end of turn. Again, very good against like the Heartfire Hero stuff. Creatures your opponent controlled can be the target of spells or abilities as though they didn't have Hexproof. Ward abilities of the creatures don't trigger, which is pretty solid. And it's nice to just have it on the battlefield so you don't have to worry about ward and stuff. You can play 2 Scavenging Ooze. Has main deck graveyard hate, but also it's like a decent finisher and gain some life. It's a 2-mana 2/2, exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and you gain 1 life. You play main deck Terra Sunder for artifact and enchantment hate, and really additional exile hate for 2 more mana. You can play 4 Preacher of the Schisms. It is a 3-mana 2/4 with Death Touch. Whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks while you have the most life or are tied for the most life, you draw a card and lose a life. So it's card advantage, it's a decent blocker, also creates more creatures, which end up being kind of hard to deal with. Really good for people that want to lean harder into the mid-range, like I play better creatures than you strategy. Competing for that 3-drop slot is Sentinel in the Nameless City. Is a 3-mana 3/4 with Vigilance. When Sentinel in the Nameless City enters or attacks, create a map token. Now, it's an even better blocker, an even better attacker. It can be on offense and defense with Vigilance. And creating a map token allows you to dig for certain things in your deck and sometimes effectively draw cards, make your creatures bigger, which is all very solid. You can play a Tranquil Frillback, which is great artifact or enchantment hate. Also decent graveyard hate, and also decent against the aggressive decks because it can gain life and block really well. You can play the second Maelstrom Pulse just as an unconditional removal for 3 mana. The third, Shieldred the Apocalypse, really good against decks that draw a bunch of cards, but also very good against the aggressive decks and being a pretty good blocker and gains life. You can play a The End, which is a 4-mana instant. Spells cost 2 less to cast if your life total is 5 or less, which is rough if that comes up. Exile target creature or planeswalker, searches controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that permanent and exile them. That player shuffles and then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So it's great unconditional removal for 4 mana and extracts a thing that we might be afraid of from their deck and exiles, so it's really good against the enduring creatures or whatever. You can play 2 Gix's Command. This 5-mana sorcery, choose 2, put 2 +1/+1 counters and up to 1 creature against lifelink till end of turn, or destroy each creature with power 2 or less, or return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand, or each opponent sacrifice a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. Now, this is mostly good against creature decks and really aggressive decks, so you can gain life and kind of wipe their board. And so if you're worried about that, Gix's Command is great. You can play 2 Thrun, Breaker of Silence. There's a 5-mana 5/5. The spell can't be countered. Has trample. And Thrun, Breaker of Silence can't be the target of non-green spells your opponent control or abilities from non-green sources your opponent control. During your turn, Thrun has Indestructible. This is very, very good against other mid-range decks and other things that are trying to remove it with spot removal. Or you can go back to the Demon package and play 4 Unholy Annex / Ritual Chamber. It's a room where 1 room, Unholy Annex, 3 mana. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. Otherwise, you just lose 2 life. And its Ritual Chamber is a 5-mana room. When you unlock this door, create a 6/6 black demon creature token with flying. So this allows you to have an enchantment that lets you draw a ton of cards. Also is a threat in and of itself, being a 5-mana 6/6, all wrapped up in one. So you're going to select 18 of these 42 cards to be added to your main deck, and you're going to pick 11 of these 25 cards in your sideboard. So let's look at them. I've already talked about Duress, I already talked about Anointment Affliction, and Nowhere to Run. But Blot Out is a 3-mana instant. Target opponent exiles a creature or planeswalker they control with the greatest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Just decent unconditional removal that doesn't target, which is pretty solid. Token Miasma. You can play 2 of these. 3-mana kicker for a green. If the spell is kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. All creatures get -2/-2 end of turn. Just a decent board wipe against these aggressive decks. You can play 2 Liliana of the Veil. Decent against decks that don't play a lot of creatures because you can control the board and make them sacrifice multiple times. Also really good against decks that you think you can win the top deck war against, like Control or something. You play 2 Malicious Eclipse. Fulfills the same role of Choking Miasma. All creatures get -2/-1 till end of turn. However, if we care about the exile factor, Malicious Eclipse is a little better. We already talked about The End, but you could play 4 Harvester of Misery. It's a 5-mana 5/4 with Menace. When Harvester of Misery enters, other creatures you get -2/-2 until end of turn. And you pay 2 mana and discard Harvester of Misery to have target creature get -2/-2 till end of turn. Really good against the aggressive decks because it can wipe their board for 5 mana or be early removal. We've already talked about Terrace Under, just artifacts and enchantment hate, and Tranquil Fillback, just kind of a jack of all trades situation. We can play up to 3 Obstinate Baloth as a 4-mana 4/4. When it enters, you gain 4 life. If a spell or ability opponent controls causes you to discard Obstinate Baloth, put it on battlefield instead of put it into your graveyard. That part is not super relevant in Standard. However, being a 4/4 body that gains 4 life is very good against the aggressive decks. You can play a Vivian Reed, a 5-mana Planeswalker that starts at 5 loyalty. It's +1, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature, a land card from among them, and put them into your hand. Put the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. Its -3 is destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Its -8 is you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +2/+2, and have vigilance, trample, and indestructible. Really good against decks that go really long. Also really solid against decks with artifacts and enchantments that we care about. And we can play 2 Ghost Vacuum. Good graveyard hate. Also decent against the enduring cards because they do hit the graveyard and you have a chance to interrupt them coming back. So you're going to select 11 of these 25 cards to be added to your deck. And if you do that, combined with selecting 18 of these 42 cards, you have your very own stock version of Golgari Midrange. The first nuance is if you should play Monster Dread Knight as a creature or keep it in your hand. And the big decision maker for that is if your hand is already strong, the pressure you get from a 3/2 on turn 2 is normally better than just like trying to make your hand a little bit better. But if you've mulliganed or your hand's kind of weak, then it is correct to play the Dread Whisper side and draw a card. But do not be afraid to play it as a 3/2 and apply that pressure if your hand's very good already. The next nuance is surrounding Glissa. Glissa has a mode that is often overlooked, and that's removing counters from something. Remember that removing counters from a Planeswalker can often kill a Planeswalker. And if you remove counters from Archfiend to the Dross, it can win you the game. People forget about that. So if you have a Glissa and your opponent has an Archfiend to the Dross, you attack and they have to chump block with their Archfiend or they lose, which is kind of a hilarious interaction. And then something else, remember Unholy Annex drains your opponent if you control a demon. Remember, Soulstone Sanctuary is a demon, and so manning up that man land has a Mutavault effect, where it's every creature type, which includes demon, which lets you drain. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.